Hello.
The big topic is innovation. We're talking about Google versus Apple. Who does better? If you're watching us, we're streaming live on LinkedIn Live on the Computer World LinkedIn page and also on YouTube. So please leave a comment or question. We might be able to get to it while we're on the air. In the meantime, be nice because, of course, we don't want a food fight in the comments.
The internet.
It is the internet, I know, but this could be kind of touchy. It's Android versus iOS.
No one has opinions about that.
Of course not. I should note that I've just had my flu shot, so if I pass out, please cut the camera, and these guys will keep going without me. I'm not that important. Okay, guys. So innovation. This has come up. This basically comes up every fall as Apple releases a new version of iOS.
Yep.
Android, new version of Android. Android 10 is out now. Mm-hmm. And there's always sort of this debate about, who's stealing from whom, who's got the better idea. JR and I had a recent show talking about gestures in Android and how they're cribbing from, iOS. iOS has dark mode, which I believe showed up first on Android. Did it not?
That was kind of around the same.
No, am I wrong on that?
Well,
anyway, go. Let's go. So.
Dark mode was threatened for years.
Yeah, promised.
It would pop up, it would go away, it would pop up, it would go away. I mean, Android wasn't the first person to do it. Apple's certainly not the first person to do it. Dark mode apps have been experimenting with dark mode forever.
Yeah.
Chrome, whatever app you use, they're the more well-known.
But it was
apps
all
have
piecemeal.
Dark modes.
It was piecemeal rather than being like a system-wide thing.
In earlier beta versions, dark mode was around in Android. It was never an option in iOS until June when iOS 13 came out. So technically, Android was first.
In other words, technically, I am correct, is what you're saying. Okay, good. I'm glad we got that settled. Okay. Good.
Yeah.
So all right. No, just kidding. Do we have any sense, as we go back and forth every fall, is it even possible to say that Google or Apple is innovating more or faster, or is it really the sort of same back and forth that you used to see between like Windows and Apple? One feature will come out, then somebody tries to one-up it, and then the next year somebody one-ups that. I mean, the triple cameras last year, Apple's finally catching up with the computational photography, things like that. I mean, what do you guys think? Is anybody winning here? Who wins?
I think it goes back and forth, and I think people buying these things ultimately win. Because at the end of the day, we're not playing teams. We're not on the team of a corporation.
I'm Team iOS, baby.
Well, you certainly are.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, I mean, we should be rooting for having better products.
Yes.
And with the gestures, there's no question that Android kind of borrowed a little bit of it. But at a certain point, it's something becoming a standard and starting to be treated as a standard. And that makes it easier for everybody because if you, within your family, like we were talking about a moment ago, if you or a spouse or a child or whatever switch platforms at some point, it's that much easier to know what you're doing when there's a standard method of getting around. And I think we could come up with a huge amount of examples. Like over time, it seems like it goes back and forth. Mm-hmm. Some years back, there was kind of the standard joke in the Android community, like the Apple event, like what Android features is Apple going to announce this year? We had the time with like widgets and the hot word voice activation, even the Today screen, which is kind of modeling off of what was once Google Now, the Google feed. Mm-hmm. So it kind of comes and goes, and certainly Google has done its share of ideas from Apple, and it's just kind of par for the course, I think.
And the implication being, though, that basically everybody wins. Rising tide of innovation, wherever it comes from, is going to lift, theoretically, all of these devices and the operating systems that we use in the same way so that eventually, would it be possible, do you think, to eventually do, we were talking earlier about moving from Android or from iOS to Android for a month, which you have to do every fall.
Yeah.
Will it be possible to be able to make that kind of move as frictionless as possible at some point?
I mean, the inherent difficulty with Android is that, so Google makes Android 10.
Yeah.
But it doesn't get on any phones for, with the exception of their own phones and a handful of others. It's getting better. But it takes a while. So, Apple makes iOS 13, and you can buy 7 or 8 different models of phone that have it. Mm-hmm. They all get updated at the same time. And Apple makes the version of iOS each year. It starts with its newest phone, and it kind of goes down in a tree.
Mm-hmm.
Google, on the other hand, has to make Android to have features that they know manufacturers are going to either use or not use, tweak to their liking. So Google isn't making Android 10 with the Galaxy S10 Plus in mind.
Yeah.
They're making it with the Pixel in mind, maybe. I don't even know if that's true. They're trying to make an operating system that can fit all different flavors, all different sizes, all different types of phones.
Mm-hmm.
So when people say, like, it doesn't become a thing until Apple does it, it's not necessarily that Apple's doing something better or more innovative. They have a built-in
They've just got the
base
controlled system.
of all these devices that
Yeah.
are going to use it, so it becomes mainstream almost immediately because adoption rate is high.
Yeah, iOS. I mean,
because they're getting it to the phones.
the vast majority of iPhone users will be on iOS 13 within a couple of months.
But that's because Apple pushes it to them.
well, right.
And
they do
Google,
push it, though.
Google pushes out Android. They give developers half a year
Yeah.
to get it ready, and they don't. Samsung's not. That's not their priority.
Mm-hmm.
Samsung wants to sell phones, and the people who buy Samsung phones aren't necessarily concerned about what version of Android they're on. It's a different thing. So Apple pushes out their features knowing, okay, this phone's going to get this feature, and we're going to go up the line. The newer phones get, more of them, and then they trickle down maybe, and, things come and go. This phone becomes obsolete. But they're able to target their audience and their phone so much better than Google is with Android. And that's not going to change.
I was just going to say, I don't see that ever changing. I mean,
not.
it just seems like it's going to be a perpetual problem. And JR,
Yeah.
God knows you've written about this
A few
so
times.
many times.
A few thousand, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. The whole issue with the fragmentation, which is not Google's. Well, it's not really Google's fault.
It's not.
It's just
It's
kind of
Google's
an inherent
problem.
part
Yes.
of the
But
way
it's
the
not the-
ecosystem
That's how
was
Android is
designed.
basically
Yeah.
designed, yeah.
Right. It's designed to be so broad. And I mean, even though there have been efforts, Google has obviously made efforts to try to, push these things out faster, to get the phone manufacturers to roll them out. But clearly, if you want, true Android, you're looking at a Pixel, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of other smaller options. OnePlus does a pretty decent job.
Yeah.
Essential does a really good job, but they only have one phone that's a couple of years old, so no one quite knows what they're up to. But yeah, if you want to get the closest thing to an apples to apples, so to speak, comparison, you have to look at the Pixel phone, not at Android as a whole, because that's the one where Google really controls everything. It does the hardware, it does the software, and the Pixel phone gets updates, the day they're released or within a few days of it at least.
And even with the Pixel phones, I mean, there have been class action lawsuits with every single phone. So, because Google isn't just designing for the Pixel phone, it's designing for this whole umbrella of phones, and things break here, things work here, and it's a trickier thing than Apple, who controls the entire.
They got
stack.
the whole stack, yeah, which I really like. And then it goes back to that, again, this is not quite innovation, but it's the idea of, with Apple, you've got the walled garden. It's a lovely garden. It's lots of things in the garden. But when you're outside the garden, you've got so much more flexibility,
Yes.
and you can do so much more with Android than you can ever do with Apple because it's so locked down.
Until Apple says, okay, you can do this now. Like,
Right.
For example, Dark Mode, I'm surprised we have it in iOS 13. I figured that would be something that they wouldn't necessarily look at for a couple more years.
I would think it's natural
not essential.
with the OLED screens, though, that are in the the iPhones. I would think that a dark mode
Sure.
is
I mean,
it's going to look
it's
gorgeous,
nice to
and
have.
it's
Well, here's an example. We don't have an always-on display on iPhone yet.
Yeah.
We have OLED.
finally got it to the watch.
Yeah, finally got into the watch. So they're making those low power displays, but that's not a priority for Apple. Android has had them for 5 years.
Yeah.
Well, and that's something, too, where you could argue, I think pretty reasonably, that sort of open model of having all those different companies contributing to it pushes things forward
Absolutely.
and drives innovation, because it's not just Google that's Android. It's Samsung, it's HTC,
Yes.
a little bit, LG, Motorola, all the different companies. So they're all trying to one-up each other with an Android in addition to competing with Apple. And so, Samsung will come out with some crazy new feature. I mean, maybe 50% of them are silly, but 50% of them end up being useful. And then a year or two later, that shows up within Android itself and makes its way to the Pixel and to whatever other number of phones. And then you have to remember, too, with Android that it really is just a different scenario in that water in the way?
No, I'm just worried you're going to knock it over.
Oh, yeah.
Because you talk with your hands.
Intense
I'm just being nice.
gesticulating,
Carry on. Carry on.
Yeah. So Android isn't just Android, the operating system. There are a lot of different pieces to the puzzle where they've really, over the years, pulled pieces out and made it more modular. So, things that in Apple land you were getting as part of iOS, even just the browser, the Mail app, the Maps app. But then even under the hood, Google has something like Google Play Services, which controls a lot of the functions on your phone, a lot of the security-related mechanisms. And those pieces are all updated multiple times a month. Everybody gets them at the same time through the Play Store. So it isn't quite a parallel comparison to talk about just the operating systems, because Android really, the operating system is kind of just one. We can get technical about it. There's like the open source code and all that. But for practical terms, Android itself, the operating system, is just one part of what really Android represents to most users.
Good point. Yeah.
And when you're talking about features, let's go back to dark mode. Samsung brought that out last year with One UI,
Mm-hmm.
and it was great. I mean, it's probably the best implementation on Android right now, including the Pixel. I mean, it's a really nice version of it, and that's a perfect example of, listen, it was around. Samsung didn't innovate it, didn't pull it out of nowhere.
No, but they did it right.
They did it right, and then
Yep.
Google, I'm sure, looked at that and said, all right, well, let's move this forward and bring it to everybody.
That's what they
Yeah,
did.
split screen was the same kind of thing.
Yes.
Samsung did that for years, and
Exactly.
LG, a couple other
Yep.
companies. But
Quick reminder, real quick, for people who are watching us live, we're talking about innovation, iOS versus Android. Who does it better? What does it mean for users? And okay, back to where we were. Let's think about what's coming. Where both of these companies are likely to be innovating, say over the next few years. I mean, I know obviously 5G and all that, but that's not really innovation. AI, machine learning, AR, VR. Do we have any thoughts about what more on computational photography?
Yeah,
would
I mean, all
presume?
of that stuff. When you look at the iPhone 11, Apple went, as it does, from 0 to 60 in the blink of an eye.
In terms of?
night mode,
Which is fabulous.
computational
but
photography.
I still wonder if they're just catching up. We don't know yet what's coming out.
But, call it catching up, but I mean, I've been testing this stuff, and
Okay.
the Pixel 4, I'm sure, will once again leapfrog that.
Yep.
But right now, Apple's iPhone 11 night mode is the best, or one of the best in the business. Huawei does a great job too,
Yeah.
and Google started that.
Yeah,
Last
exactly.
year, when we
That's that
when we
leap
saw that on the
innovation-
Pixel 3,
innovation.
it was like, whoa, what is going on here? And Apple obviously was working on something. They didn't just start like, oh, now we have to do this.
Yeah.
These are
Oh, no.
everything overlaps.
Yeah.
It's a matter of who brings it out first. The difference between Apple and Google, the biggest difference between Apple or iOS and Android, or however you want to say it, Apple doesn't iterate in public ever.
No.
They will not release something unless it is rock solid, or all right, a few exceptions.
About that Apple Maps app when it first came out.
There are
Yes.
some exceptions.
Yes.
But for the most part, they won't release something until they feel it's up to their standards to be released. Whereas Google will say, all right, we have a germ of an idea.
Yep.
Let's put it
Let's
into...
throw it out there and
Yes.
start seeing how
and,
people are going to...
And people will build on it, will build on it, will improve it. And, maybe it's beta, maybe it's not, but we're going to put it out there and see where it goes. Maybe it goes nowhere. Maybe it turns into the greatest thing we've ever done.
Mm-hmm.
Apple, they're never going to do that.
Yeah.
it is a difference in their DNA, just kind of
Yes.
the way they approach things and operate. And I think you could probably argue that both sides have their pros and cons.
Sure.
The Google stuff can certainly get frustrating because you get something that's kind of unfinished, or you get something that you love, and then 2 years later it's discontinued.
Yeah, Google, it's gone before you know it.
Yeah, but you do get to kind of see and to some degree shape the way products progress over time. I mean, certainly they listen to the feedback on the whole. Not that any one person has a whole lot to say, but it's an interesting thing to be a part of it. It can also be a frustrating thing.
Yeah, I think part of it depends on, and again, if you're just watching, just tuning in, we're talking about innovation, iOS versus Android, who does it better. And basically the answer is they both do it well over time. And in any given year, what I was going to say is, if you're fixated on being first with something, a gesture, computational photography, night mode, dark mode, whatever, there are going to be times when whoever your favorite manufacturer is not first. But the point is, everybody over time will start to see these things trickle out in different devices, different parts of software.
And on the other hand, if you're a manufacturer trying to be first, you're going to run into major problems. We saw it with the Galaxy Fold this year.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Samsung was hell-bent on beating everyone to the market with a folding phone, and it was a disaster.
Why would a company not see that coming? I mean, when they were talking about it, we were all talking like, this doesn't look like it's going to
Yeah.
work.
It was obvious to everyone from the
So
start.
how is it
Totally
not
was.
obvious?
Yeah.
Now, I mean, and that's where innovation can get you in trouble.
Yeah,
You get
yeah,
so
yeah.
caught up in trying to be first that you blow it.
And I mean, yeah, you can say they blew it. However,
Well-
in 5 years, when folding phones are a thing,
Yeah.
or if they're a thing, Samsung can say,
I'm
yeah,
not
well, we were
convinced.
first, which is what they do with the Note still.
Yeah.
They have a thing of before they introduced the new Note, we were the first with the big screen, the first with the blah, 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 blah,
Does
blah.
anybody care?
Samsung likes to do that.
Yeah,
That's
but,
their thing.
But 4 or 5 years later, does anybody really care? I mean,
No,
who-
they care
you know?
about who did it best and who's doing it now.
Right.
But Samsung loves
Right.
to do that. They
Yeah,
love
well,
to.
and I mean they do dominate the Android market.
They
I
totally
mean,
do.
It's anyone's. You could speculate as to exactly why, but they were certainly first at doing a lot of things,
Yes.
and they
Yeah.
ate up that market
It's
share.
good
been
that they're
hard to get
doing
around
it. I'm not arguing that.
And they
but
make
just-
great phones. There's no one saying that they make, but
except for the Galaxy Fold.
which, they'll come back around and there will be something around
Probably the
that
Galaxy
will
Fold
work.
4
Yes.
will be
Remember,
much
it
nicer.
folded. It just didn't work. It folded just fine.
The
It did
day
fold.
the Fold came out, I wrote an article saying the Fold looks cool, but I want the third generation.
Well,
because
and-
if you look at Samsung's phones, that's the trajectory.
And really, do you want to name your device the Fold? I mean, the connotations
It is what
there
it
are
is.
not necessarily good. We should probably pause and see if we've got any questions or comments from folks who may be looking at us live.
Yeah, we've got some questions. One is a comment, kind of going along with what you were just talking about, and they say, let's be honest, Apple's killing it with regards with how they manufacture the hardware, and Android is killing it with regards to how they manufacture their software.
I mean, there's some truth to
I
that.
can see
for
some of that.
sure.
That's actually, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, Apple's hardware.
We were talking about it earlier.
It's top notch, but the Galaxy S10
I like
Plus and the
my
Note
phone.
10 Plus are also top notch. The OnePlus 7T, really nice phone. I mean, there are comparisons on the Android side. Android 10 is great, but so is iOS 13, and we can argue about this all day. What I said before, as I'll say it again, where Apple has that benefit is controlling everything. That's why when you pick up an iPhone, the software flows into the hardware flows. It's tricky to get that on an Android phone.
It can be done, but it's not universally. If you're getting an Android device, you're not necessarily guaranteed. Getting that sort of, what's the word?
The experience.
Ecosystem.
The connection
The
between the
holistic
software.
sense.
Yeah, holistic. There's, 90s word synergy, but I mean, how the software and hardware works together,
Yeah.
flowing seamlessly.
Well, that's where Pixel kind of has
I
that
was just gonna say-
over what you're going to get. It's a very different experience you'll have on a Pixel phone versus a Galaxy phone versus a Huawei or whoever else phone.
Yeah. Okay. So to that comment, we would agree that both sides are doing lots of things right.
If
Yeah.
the Pixel was a nice phone.
Do you guys think it's fair to say, too, that Google is generally ahead in the realm of services? I mean, there are exceptions. It's not like, but I think as a whole, that's fair, and maybe that's
Yeah,
what
I
that
think
person was
Apple's
getting
playing
at, too.
catch up there, and
Yeah.
sometimes Apple does services well. A lot of times they don't always work so well. I at least I have found.
I mean, Apple, that's the one place where Apple has fallen on its face very publicly.
yeah,
But Maps is getting better. iCloud is legitimately good now.
yeah,
And they now they have the Apple Arcade was. I guess Google Play Pass was kind of there, but Apple Arcade was the first to kind of put it all together in a full thing. TV Plus, like they're expanding their services. Apple Pay is rock solid. So
Yeah.
while Google
Apple Pay.
has its thing, and Google's strength is that it's not just Android, you can get that everywhere. Apple is getting much better at understanding that the hardware is nice. The software is what matters.
yeah.
Android is kind of caught up on hardware, because if you look at early Android phones compared to where the iPhone was then, it
Yes.
took a while
Oh,
for
for
Android
sure.
to start
Totally.
really having that type of nice
Agreed.
devices. And it seems like on the flip side, Apple is catching up with maybe not software on the whole, but like with services and kind of the bigger picture of how they all fit together maybe.
Michelle, other questions?
Yeah,
Comments?
we want excuse me. Someone's asking about speed. Is one faster than the other? A lot of people on here saying iPhone is faster, but is there a difference?
Michael.
I mean, I'm
thoughts?
going to say I've been using the iPhone 11 for 2 weeks now. That has the A13 Bionic processor, and it is fast.
It is
as hell.
fast.
And
But
know,
I mean, how fast do you really need to open?
What I mean by fast is it's so optimized for this. The iOS 13 is so optimized for the chip, for the hardware,
Yeah.
that everything feels like it's moving as fast as it possibly can move. It doesn't have a 90 hertz screen like some Android phones have, and it's a bit behind in that. In that vein, there are better there is better Android technology.
Yeah.
But the way Apple uses its optimizations with the chip, with the iOS, with the latest version of iOS, and you can see that on older phones too. It's not just this one. You don't really get that with even if you're using a phone with a Snapdragon 855 Plus, the latest processor that's out there. You don't get that sense of speed that you get with the iPhone. Certainly not over time. Out of the box, yeah, the OnePlus 7T has the best processor in the world, really nice operating system, and it has a 90 hertz screen, and it feels super fast. In 6 months down the line, that's different
Why is that?
because Apple keeps optimizing iOS
As they go along, yeah.
It's a continual process.
Yeah. You agree, JR?
I think most phones have a tendency to. Don't you think iPhones slow down over time too? If you talk to somebody who's using a year-old device,
In my experience, it takes a lot longer for Apple to show their signs of wear than it does for Android. Like if I have a Galaxy S9, and it's like I'm pushing through like sandpaper.
Yeah.
Whereas an iPhone 10, it still feels pretty good. It still feels pretty fast and pretty modern.
Yeah,
And I just think it's that attention to optimization that Apple's, and it's also that they're able to do, because they control, again, the whole stack.
You know, the whole speed thing, though, to me reminds me of the CPU wars back in the 90s. At some point, you get to a point where it's diminishing returns.
It's almost an academic argument.
It is. You know, you can run some speed tests and get to a certain level, but beyond that, you're almost beyond human capabilities of what you need.
Benchmarks are not
Here's a
real
world thing that I noticed. On this phone, I have, and I only noticed because I counted for an article I'm writing tomorrow.
Okay.
I have 40 app screens in my recent apps screen.
Yeah.
When I do my thing. On my Pixel, I have about 5.
Okay.
Samsung, 20-something. Now, this only has 4 gigs of RAM.
Yep.
Samsung, some of their phones have 12. Pixel has 4 as well, and that's what I mean when I'm talking about the way Apple uses what it can have. Its processor, its RAM, its storage, and it maximizes everything about it.
Yeah. Okay. Good point. Michelle, others?
Yeah, we got one specific to iPhone. Somebody's asking, why does the iPhone have only a single SIM? Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but this is what they're asking.
I don't know.
Does it?
Yeah, that's not totally true.
Did they have an isn't there an eSIM option?
There's a single hardware SIM and there's an eSIM option, and overseas they do support. I think
It's a virtual SIM.
It wasn't
basically.
on the iPhone XS when it came out. It didn't support it immediately, but I think it added it
Yeah, I think
down
it's
the
been
line.
added.
But they do have dual SIM phones.
One of them's real, one's virtual.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And another one here is somebody's asking about the future of authentication going into both of them, iOS and Android.
Yeah.
Seems like everyone's
Yeah.
moving toward Face.
If we knew that, we'd be working for either Apple or Google, right?
I got to tell you, so
I like Face ID. If we're talking things like that.
yeah, well, I assume that's what they're talking.
Yeah.
So I use Android pretty much exclusively for 11 months out of the year. And with the exception of a couple, the LG G8, Huawei phones, they're all fingerprint sensors in some way, whether it's in screen
On the front, the back.
or on the back or wherever it is. And they're good. They're fine.
Mm-hmm.
I had issues with the early in-display fingerprint sensors. They've gotten better. They're a little bit faster. They're not the best, but they're fine. When I switch to Face ID, it is like a revelation.
Yeah.
How
That's the one thing that
smooth
feels
it
really
is.
future tech to me.
I
about
pick up
the
my
iPhones.
phone, but if I don't look at it, the notifications are locked. I pick it up, they open it up. I don't know why Android manufacturers, they've had 2 years now. Apple, that was a real innovation. Face ID with true depth camera was like, whoa, we've never seen this before in a phone.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the iPhone 10. That was 2 years ago. And like I said, the only 2 manufacturers that have anything close are LG and Huawei. And I don't understand why. It's clearly the future.
Yeah.
It's got to be.
And it seems like the Pixel 4, widely
Yes.
believed, nothing's official, but pretty certain that it's going to have
Yeah, rumors
something
say that
similar
it
with
will
it. And
have
it'll
that.
supposedly use the whole Project Soli, which is a radar-based gesture detecting system to, in other ways, sense when you're there, and you could hold your phone in any direction. So that may be sort of the innovation that
And there's
brings it forward.
gestures and things. And yeah,
Right,
there's
right.
a lot of talk about that. We'll see how it works for one.
Yep.
Right.
But two is, there's a lot of things about this that have gotten better over the past 2 years. For one, the angle.
You mean Face ID?
Like I used to have to hold it exactly here. Now I can be
Yeah.
over here, and it still works. And like Apple puts the thought into, all right, so how are people using this system?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see. Hopefully, the Google 4. Yeah, there's a lot of rumors, a lot of smoke there.
Yeah.
That this Project Soli is going to bring. I hope to God, because the pictures I've seen of that giant bezel, there better be something up there.
There will be,
But
I'm sure.
it looks like that could kick off the Face ID type thing for the rest of the Android line. But we haven't heard many rumors from Samsung. Samsung is, for all intents and purposes, the Apple of Android. Once Samsung does it, it becomes a thing. And I haven't read any rumors that the Galaxy S11 is going to have that.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see because there is the distinction, as we've been talking about, between Android and Google/Pixel, and
Yeah.
the whole Project Soli radar thing is definitely a Pixel, a Google
Totally.
property.
Yeah.
It's not something
Yeah.
that it's not part of Android. It is for Google's phones and for
Right.
the purpose of selling Google
But
phones.
so is night mode, and everyone kind of quickly got on
Yeah,
that.
so
train.
there may be
I
something
would think it
similar
would
that
like
comes
spread
out.
out if once Google rolls it out, assuming they do.
I will say,
Because-
in testing the OnePlus 7T, which just came out, I've been pretty impressed with the Face Unlock on that, and it obviously doesn't have any radar
But
detection.
the problem
but-
with that, yeah, I agree. But
it's
that's,
pretty fast and consistent.
It is fast,
Yeah.
but it's not secure. It's using their camera, so it's a 2D
Right.
image.
It doesn't have the hardware factor.
So
in
if
it.
you
Yeah.
have a good high quality image of you, someone could unlock your phone, and most likely will. It does work.
Yeah.
So the difference is Apple is 3D and it's constantly learning and changing and everything else. So it's more secure than a fingerprint sensor.
Right. The OnePlus is sort of like a better version of the super old ice cream sandwich era
Yeah, yeah.
Android Face Unlock. which,
Kinda,
I mean, it
yeah.
didn't work well at that point, but
Right.
it had the same security problems. Whereas supposedly what we'll see in the Pixel 4 will be taking it to that same
It's going to
level
be that
of
3D
security.
dot
Yeah.
matrix stuff where it like, kind of takes a map of your whole face and
Mm-hmm.
the contours and
Yeah.
knows if you have a beard or glasses, blah, blah, blah.
Clearly, so it sounds like the future for that is going to be Face ID of some sort, both on both operating systems. Yeah.
And one more here, talking about security, you just brought that up. Is iPhone more secure than Android phones?
More secure?
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's more secure. I think it's more private, depending on the settings that you use.
Yeah.
I mean, security, you lock down your phone, it's pretty much locked.
Right.
You know, whether you have to use a fingerprint sensor or Face ID, if you're not there, if someone's not, you know, I'm comfortable when I'm using an Android phone that if I lose my phone, if I leave it somewhere, I'm not gonna have
Yeah,
to.
the-
I'm not gonna have to worry about it.
There's a possibility for phishing or any kind of
For sure.
malware
Well, that's for
or
sure.
whatever on
Which
any
is possible
device.
anywhere.
To a certain degree, it kind of falls upon you as a
Yeah.
user to have best practices and to know that you're not going to click on a link in an email that you don't see and all that. And
Or
we-
sideload an app that you don't know. what it
right.
is.
Android
Then
gets a
then you're
bad
on your
rap
own.
with the
Yes.
security
Please,
because
I
of
wanted
that.
to ask you because we've talked about this before, and you're right. There's a lot of discussion that Android's less secure, but you've made the point repeatedly that a lot of these things that are like insecurities and flaws are not real world flaws, and they're things that you'd have to
Right.
do like
Right.
12 things wrong before you might be vulnerable.
They're almost exclusively marketing campaigns conducted by companies that sell you software to
Oh, how
protect your phone
convenient!
from that.
Funny
Yes.
how that works.
Right.
So yeah, it is a theoretical thing, but it's very rare for there to be a real serious problem that has impacted any number of people. Usually, by the time it comes out, it's been addressed, and the same thing happens on iOS. Any software has flaws, and people find issues with it, and then those flaws get patched.
Right.
But yeah, the sensational stories about malware and this security threat or that one are very rarely of any real world consequence, and almost always super easily mitigated just by what's already in your phone and the fact that you're not downloading
And by being
apps
smart
from,
about it.
Right, you're not downloading apps from a China-based forum. You're downloading apps from the Play
Damn,
Store.
I shouldn't do that, huh?
Yeah, well, you
Okay.
are,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'll stop downloading
And
from China.
the other thing, again, to bring it all back to this, is that security updates, Android pushes out once a month, but when that reaches your phone is the question mark.
Right.
When Apple pushes out a security update or an iOS update, it pushes it out to everybody
Everybody.
at the same time.
Yeah, and same with OS updates, because Android OS updates also have
Also.
security
Yep,
enhancements. So
and
that's
it's a
another
matter
reason why
of-
there's
Yeah.
you could say that the Pixel is the more advisable option to use on Android.
Yeah.
for
If
that.
I was
Right.
if I was getting an Android phone, it would be a Pixel.
Yeah, and that's why it's
For-
usually
for
what I
that reason.
recommend. Exactly.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
you're right. You're going to get the September security update or we're in October now. We're going to get the October security update in October.
Mm-hmm.
On a Galaxy S10, you might get it in late October.
Yeah.
You might not get it at all.
And
I mean, of a lot of phones.
It's the not
yeah.
get it at all part that that worries
most,
me about that.
not most, a lot of them are starting to guarantee security updates
For
for
like 2
an
years,
X number of years.
wasn't it,
Yeah,
like a
and,
couple
and
years?
Android One is becoming more of a thing where people are looking at. Nokia is doing an amazing job with that stuff, where they guarantee 2 years of OS updates and 3 years of security updates. But you're right; it's still an issue.
Yeah.
because manufacturers aren't concerned about old
As
phones.
you said,
They're
they want
concerned
to
about
sell
their
you
bottom
a
line.
new
Yes.
phone and
They
start
want
you
to sell
over
you a
again.
new phone.
And most customers don't.
They have no
care
idea
enough.
what
They don't
version
know.
of Android
Yeah.
they're on.
It's
Yeah.
well, right, because Samsung isn't going to promote
Right.
that because
And
it doesn't help its
Right.
interest.
I take it, I look at my parents. My parents both have iPhones. And my dad will call me up and say, "Oh, what's iOS 13.1?" And I'll explain it to him, and he'll download it and upload, and that'll be that. But if he didn't get that notification for 6 months,
He wouldn't
even
be going-
notice.
yeah, wouldn't know it's there.
He wouldn't even
Right.
notice.
So
my phone's working.
So short answer for security is both of them are relatively secure in their own different ways. And if you're really concerned about continuous security updates, you might be a little more leaning more toward iOS, but
Or Pixel, if you're going to go Android.
or Pixel for Android. Any other questions or comments before we wind down?
I think we can start wrapping it up.
Yeah, we're going to wrap it up then. Okay. So I
Was
think
this our longest talk of all time?
this is
It is a long one.
and worth every bit of it. The point being with innovation that both sides are continuing to innovate. There will be this back and forth. One year somebody's got something, the other year the other one's got it.
We didn't even talk about gestures.
In the end, we'll
barely touched on it.
We'll get into gestures.
We talked about it a lot.
We
yesterday.
did, yeah. We did a whole thing on gestures yesterday.
I have thoughts too.
Well, before I let you go, real quick, you got 30
No,
seconds.
I don't wanna get
Gestures,
into it.
go. 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Okay, fine. I think that Android dropped the ball completely on gestures. They had.
Ooh, I don't know if this is going to be 30 seconds.
I don't think so either.
Go ahead.
For years before, the iPhone was stuck with its home button
Yep.
till the iPhone 8, which was 2 years ago.
Yep.
Android had virtual navigation. It was a good method. It was fine. No one on that. None of these manufacturers, and I include Google in that, obviously. They none of them said, "All right, what's the next step here?"
Yeah.
Rather than tapping a virtual button, what can we do with this? Where can we go with this? They could have been developing systems for years. Now Google is saying, "Oh well, Apple did it. Apple did, and it's a great system but it works with this phone."
Yeah.
So Google's trying to take this and maybe put their own stamp on it, and I think it's clunky, it's messy, and they could have led the way rather than following.
Okay. JR, thoughts?
Oh no, I
before?
agree. It was definitely a reactionary sort
Yeah,
of thing.
and it
I
didn't
mean,
need to
and-
be. Yeah.
And
So
it does
failed
feel like it
opportunity
was
is what you're saying.
Yeah, it feels like we
Yeah.
took the idea of gestures and kind of threw it in instead of thinking about how it fits in. We talked a lot
Exactly right.
yesterday, and this isn't even an exact Apple borrowing, but particularly with the back gesture swiping in, how that overlaps with so many parts of Android that
That's the
things that you're already
problem.
doing,
Right.
and it's just awkwardly thrown in. And they say, well, let's throw in a sensitivity setting, so
Which
that you
just
can
makes
turn
it
up or
more
down.
complicated.
Right.
You're adding
It
layers of
seems like it was a
complications.
rushed out. We've got to do something. So hey, let's do this weird mashup in Pi, and then in Android 10 we'll
Try to
Try
fix
again
it
and-
put something else on top of
Yeah.
it, and it's
No,
I-
it
I
feels
think-
like just like what you said.
I
agree. They
think
could have
by
done more early.
Android 12 or whatever, that gestures will be where they're supposed to be for that ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, it feels like a cheap imitation.
Okay, there you have it. So that's our final thought on innovation. Our final thought on innovation.
No more thoughts.
Michael, thanks for being here. JR,
Thank
thanks
you.
for being here.
Of course.
Great conversation. Thanks again for watching us. If you're looking at us on the YouTube channel, please subscribe if you're not a subscriber already. If you're looking at us on LinkedIn Live, please subscribe or follow the Computer World page so you can see what's coming up.
And you made it through without passing out.
Made it through. The flu shot is beginning to,
Right.
I can feel it though. So before I go, I should say thank you guys and thanks for watching. We'll be back soon with Preston Growler, I believe, is next week with Preston Growler. More answers to Windows 10 questions. So get those questions in. Thanks everybody. Thanks for watching.